at you from the Exodus headquarters in Ohio. Let's jump right into today's episode.
Hey everyone, it is already episode 18 of Trail Cam Radio, and guess what? It's 2019, and it's Trail Cam Tuesday, and we're bringing you another episode, and what's a better way to start the year off than Trail Cam Radio and Trail Cam Tuesday?
There's not. I'm still recovering.
Yeah. Did you have a good Christmas, good New Year?
Yeah, it was good, man. Holidays are always busy on my side. But yeah, the kids are getting big, so it's always more fun every year. Partied hard. New Year's Eve feels at 36 I can still do it. I feel pretty good.
That's what's up. Yeah. It's I always enjoy this time of year for the most part. It's weird. The older you get, like the dynamic of Christmas changes so much, so quickly for everybody, and it's an ongoing evolution for everybody. And I don't know, I'm ready to do some ice fishing. Honestly, like I'm ready to do some ice fishing.
Where the heck did that come from?
I have always, for many years, I've spent many New Year's Eves in Wisconsin with some buddies. We'd always go up and go ice fishing. It was Christmas break, and we'd always go ice fishing. It was always like a good way to kick off the year. And so I associate the New Year's with ice fishing, but I didn't get to go up there this year, but maybe next year I'll put that in the books.
Huh, that's something I've never done.
It's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. You know, are you scared to walk on the ice?
No, that doesn't bother me. No, that doesn't bother me.
No, it's a lot of fun if you get on some fish and chop them up and have a belly full of bluegills. But today we're talking your second language. We're talking trail camera troubleshooting. And this isn't necessarily the most exciting episode, but it is something that a lot of people should keep in mind. If you walk 2 miles in the backwoods or 3 miles in the backwoods and you know a couple of these things, it can change a lot of things. It can change your trip, and it can save you a few cuss words if you know some of these things.
Yeah, not only that, but even if it could save you time on the back end, dealing with customer service regardless of the company, having some general knowledge and showing that you've kind of troubleshot maybe some of the issues that you're experiencing on your own. When you present that information to a customer service rep, they're going to be like, "Oh man, this guy's pretty legit. He knows what he's talking about. He's gone through the process of maybe troubleshooting some of the very minor things at home. Let's get them taken care of." Yeah,
and it helps direct the conversation much quicker.
Absolutely.
If you do know some of these basic things, so it's a good thing to know. And once you have this kind of in your back pocket, it does change a lot of the ways you look at cameras, and you can diagnose an issue quicker, or you can fix it in the field, which is most ideal if you are experiencing some level of an issue.
Right.
So do you just want to jump right into this, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So I made kind of a rough list of, I've handled the phones before. You handle a lot of the phone customer service end of things. So these are some things that I've experienced, and I know that you experienced as well. But one of the most common things that we get is they call in and they say, "My SD card is not reading. What's going on?"
Yeah, that's pretty common. One of the more common calls that we get. There's a few things there. Now, one, obviously, it could be your physical card. That's why we've talked about best SD card practices. We've written blogs on it. That best practice guide will prevent a lot of this. A lot of the stuff that you can encounter on that end from the actual physical card. But if you're having card error messages, such as SD card locked, no SD card, it revolves around the card socket, on the camera or on the board, not being able to either recognize that card or not being able to read the file structure, the file allocation tables, or the free space left on that card, which is caused from, could be a firmware thing, but typically it's caused from the contacts on the back of the card not properly connecting or contacting the contacts inside the card socket on the camera.
And I know we've mentioned this before, but if you use an SD card for a long time and you're taking them in and out of the camera, they get those grooves. So that's
they wear. Yeah,
that's what you're referring to right there.
Yeah. They're not meant forever. are not meant to last forever. I mean, they will wear out. Taking them in, I mean, that's over extended use, but it does happen. Or if they get wet. In fact, I just yesterday I was trying to do an update on a camera, on a render camera, the cell cam, and I was using this card right here, and of course it's labeled. Mm-hmm. That's part of our best practice guide is to label those cards, so if you do have an issue, you can identify which card it is and get it out of your fleet. Mm-hmm. That's pretty important that you're not putting that card in other
circulating,
cameras. Right, circulating the problem. But for whatever reason, this card was used to, like I said, perform an update on a render camera, and during the update, the firmware crashed at like 6% completion. Thought it was a fluke, so I went back in, reformatted this card, reinstalled the firmware on it, went to update another camera, the same thing happened. So I don't know exactly what it is. The file allocation tables were correct on this card. It was FAT32 was the file organization system, 32-bit allocation size. So all that stuff was good, but something on this card was bad. And again, it was labeled, and I was able to diagnose that by using a new card, same file allocation tables, or same FAT32 file structure, same 32-bit allocation size, and perform those updates in both those cameras with another card. So nothing's different there other than the physical card itself.
Yeah. So that's typical troubleshooting kind of. I mean, that's the perfect example of experiencing an issue and working backwards and finding what it can be.
Yeah, I guess so. Troubleshooting standard SD card errors or messages, start with the card first. Mm-hmm. That's the easiest thing to diagnose. But the biggest thing is to have them labeled to be able to identify which card is bad, which card is not bad. Check the contacts in the back, make sure they're not worn, there's not dirt on them. Just a little bit of dirt either on the card or in the card socket itself will prevent that proper contact, and the camera won't recognize it. So one of those things, if you do get a card error and you're in the field and you think it's a new card and you think the card's good, take the camera and just, like the old Nintendo style games, like when they overheat, you'd have to blow on them, to get them to work.
Don't spit in them.
Don't spit in them. But you can blow in the card socket or in a card slot in the camera, and a lot of times if it's dust or debris, it'll dislodge that or blow that dust off. You stick the card back in, and sometimes, a lot of times, that'll correct the issue.
Yeah, pull out the flashlight on your phone too.
Yeah.
You can see if there is debris
look inside,
or a little piece of mud or twig or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Most of the time, I think that happens on running those cameras 365, like on food plots or ag fields in dusty areas.
Yeah.
Where there's dust getting in those, and that's typically what the cause of that is.
Yeah, I mean that can be that's a pretty easy thing to troubleshoot, and I think it's possibly one of the more common things in those scenarios where it is dusty or it is out 365. Right. The odds of some sort of obstruction building up in there, it could happen. So keep that in mind, and that's something that you can fix in the field pretty easily. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, you have other cards with you.
Yeah.
You have your flashlight on your phone. Go in there and check it out, and give it the old Nintendo.
Yeah, I mean, on the more technical side of things, the actual card slot or card socket itself could be damaged.
Yeah.
On our cameras, those are through mounted on the board. Not the easiest thing to go in there and fix, especially if they're through mounted. They're surface mounted. It's a little bit different. A little bit easier to remove that solder and put that new piece of hardware on. But if the card socket itself is damaged, you're pretty much SOL. I mean, you're at that point, you're going to have to contact customer service, and they're going to have to do some type of warranty or repair on the actual product. Beyond that, it could also be a firmware issue. So if you've, for whatever reason, not followed that best SD card practice by labeling, having dedicated SD cards per camera, and only using those cards in specific models, having them labeled, there's possibilities of attaching corrupt files or cookies onto that firmware, causing issues too, which is a little more technical and harder to diagnose on the consumer end. So, but start with a card and work backwards.
No, that's all good stuff. And don't hesitate too if you run into this issue. I mean, that's something that we're more than happy to help you with if you do have this issue. Hopefully, if you purchase another camera, hopefully they'll be willing to help you out as well. So,
right.
Another really big and common issue, or at least I can already in my head I can hear this person or like this scenario. They call in and they say my camera's not turning on, and that's usually what they say. I know there's a few things that you can test right off the bat. Probably the first one is make sure the batteries are working. Check the batteries. Number 2, make sure those contacts are or there's no corrosion or anything like that. Those contacts work. You didn't lose the spring when you're popping batteries in and out or something like that.
Right.
Anything else to add on that?
No, I mean that's it for the most part. And if you think there's the easiest way to test they're super easy to test. You can buy a little battery tester for a couple bucks, or if you have a multimeter or whatever, just make sure those alkaline batteries fully charged are 1.5 volts. Alkaline or lithiums are a little hotter than that. I think they're 1.7 volts off the top of my head. But then once those batteries get down to 1.3 volts, you're going to start to see performance issues, but the camera itself should still power on. So beyond that, if your batteries are testing good, like you said, check the contacts and connections in your battery tray. Make sure, like if you have a typical clamshell housing where there's a positive negative wire going from your battery tray into that board, make sure that's not loose on one end, like the solder isn't broken, when the wires aren't damaged themselves. And then beyond that, typically it could be a bad switch is typically what we see, which we've had to replace some of those past few months. Switch, so super easy to change, super easy to fix. But again, there's probably not a lot of companies that are going to take
the time to go in and fix that actual camera. Yeah, and that's something where we pride ourselves on to do so and get that camera back out to you so you can get back to taking pictures or whatever you want to take pictures of.
Yep.
Let's talk about corrupt files just for a little bit. I think that's something that maybe isn't as common, but it's still something that
it still shows up. Not as common, but it does still show up. From guys, and that again relates back to using SD cards. The best practice is not changing those cards in from one camera to the next. I will say this: every camera, every model uses a different logic, firmware, a different writing process. And with our first camera, the Lift 1, I know there were issues with guys running cards and covert cameras. I can't say which specific model, but covert cameras, there was something they were attaching to that SD card, and then when that SD card was put into our Lift 1 camera, it would cause issues. So that's where, like, the best practice SD card, those practices are a big deal. But as far as corrupt files, they could be lines through your pictures, scrambled pictures, the same thing with the video. And basically what that amounts to is the file allocation tables aren't structured right for the device, or there's a bug or something going on with the firmware that's not allowing the camera to write properly to the card. The best thing to do, the easiest way to troubleshoot that is use try a different SD card. And if it's it could also be a firmware bug too. I think some of these firmware systems are so large, it's really hard to go through every single function and every possibility inside those user settings. There could be a bug when you have your time lapse. Let's say you have the camera in time lapse mode and you're taking pictures every 30 seconds, and for whatever reason you have your operating hours set to certain parameters. There could be a bug with just the way you have that set up that's causing something going on. So, but the easiest thing to troubleshoot is probably remove that camera from the field, take it home for 24 hours, throw a different SD card in it, make sure the SD cards go through the process of formatting, making sure all that stuff's good, and then just taking some test photos to see how it's actually writing to the card. And on another note, it could also be, when we run into this with Apple products, depending on the format of the file extension, your media player might not be able to read those files.
And that I'm an Apple user. I found that with the Trek video. You have to use a file converter. To be honest, I just run pictures for that.
Yeah.
And that was also for the Lift 1, the same thing as
those AVI files.
AVI files, yeah.
Yeah, those AVI files. So when you're using, what is the standard Mac?
QuickTime.
QuickTime.
I believe it's QuickTime or QuickPlayer. That's what's built in, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that was really loud.
We just got an email.
There is VLC. I don't know what that acronym stands for. Video something.
I'm not sure.
Something or another. It's a free download for Apple devices that will recognize those files, and that's typically what we tell folks.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's something that a lot of people experience, and even for people who use the adapter for their phone. If you run an iPhone, sometimes it can be.
Right.
I found where sometimes it even skips around a little bit, like the videos.
Well, that's typically
So
your videos will be, when you go back and view them, they'll be really jerky, like kind of freeze frame, fast forward type thing, where it's not picking up those frames and in consecutive order on a smooth.
We'll link that file converter too in this.
Yeah, it's not actually. I don't think it's a file converter. I think it's just a different media player.
So you just download the media player and use that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's other download or software programs or whatever you can download to convert those files. If you want to go to like an MOV or an MP4 or a different file extension, I think that's something totally different there.
So, what should we link?
You can link whatever you want.
Okay. We'll leave some sort of tool for you to use if you're an Apple user to switch
I think
that things
VLC is probably the
easiest.
The easiest, yeah.
Okay.
There's no complications there. They could just open the native format of those AVI files and let them play.
Another thing that comes up every now and then, and it's very visual if it does happen to you, is the picture has some level of pink on it or a red or like a different hue that doesn't look natural, and that's typically the IR filter. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that's probably a pretty common thing. Guys are experiencing across the board. Maybe not necessarily as much with us, and it does happen with us. But I know it's prevalent in different makes and models across the trail camera industry. But those pink photos or the pink, it almost looks like a filter, like an Instagram filter,
IG with a pink bubble kind of.
Right, and that's what that's caused by is the IR filter actually being stuck. That there's a filter, unless you're running a 2-lens camera that has a dedicated night lens with a dedicated image sensor and a dedicated day lens with a dedicated day image sensor. There has to be, there's a filter that drops over top of the lens to capture the nighttime images. So it picks up that the wavelength of that light, depending on what kind of flash unit you're operating on. And when that gets stuck, that's what's causing that pink hue during your daytime stuff. Depending on what kind of camera it is, there's different ways to think people are going to troubleshoot. I know I just talked to a guy that we did a repair on his camera from California, and he runs some Ultra cameras, and he said the specific model that they're running, or he's running, is notorious for having IR filter issues, like them being stuck. And their way of fixing it is sticking that thing in a dark room, and then basically flipping a light switch on, allowing that light metering system to pick up the light, in hopes that it's going to rack that IR filter open again. That's not a fix. There's a reason why that thing's failing, and doing that isn't, that's a Band-Aid. It's not gonna fix the problem. More often than not, it's gonna happen again. So typically, what we do, if that is occurring, we replace that whole lens assembly. So we replace the lens and the IR filter on that specific camera. Now, if you're in a situation where you don't want to mess with contacting another manufacturer, a lot of times you can just take that camera and just smack the side of it. Give it a good whack, and a lot of times it'll cause that thing to be unstuck, I guess, for lack of better words.
It's my kind of troubleshooting.
Yeah, just smack it.
Yeah. No, I think that's good to know. In a pinch, but otherwise, that's something we can fix, and we're happy to do so. But I think that happens, and it's the most visual of a lot of these different things.
And a lot of times it might not be stuck. If the filter is stuck, all your daytime pictures are gonna be like that. Now, if you have one, like in transition period, and you have one or two photos that are coming out pink, or the opposite, if they're blacked out or whatnot, that the filter could be sticking a little bit, or the light metering. There could be an issue with the light metering system too. I mean, that's always possible, but typically it's the mechanical side of the IR filter.
That makes sense. Let's talk about power consumption. That's another thing that people say, my camera's eating batteries. What's going on? So,
well, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to that. The easiest way to troubleshoot something in the field is throw another set of batteries in, number one. But if you think your camera's eating batteries, test the batteries to make sure that every battery that you're putting in the camera is good, because if one cell is bad, or we have one bad battery, it's going to cause the resistance inside inside those batteries to discharge into another battery. So that could be one thing. But look at your terminals, make sure there's no corrosion, either from water penetration, moisture penetration, or any kind of leakage from, if you're running alkaline batteries, if there's any kind of corrosion from battery acid on your the battery tray and the terminals on the tray.
That's good stuff. That's usually not a good sign for whatever reason that's happening.
It's not.
That's usually pretty tough.
Yeah, you either have a seal issue on the camera, or again you have battery damage, which
is not good either.
That's why we preach lithium batteries.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, another really common thing across the board, just talking to folks who run whatever camera, a lot of times people say, my camera's taking a bunch of blank pictures, and another one is my camera's not taking any pictures when something walks in front of it. Let's tackle the person that's getting a ton of different blank pictures. Let's walk through that.
Like just random, nonstop pictures.
Yeah.
So that relates to the PIR sensor. So going back and understanding how those things work, that PIR sensor typically has two elements inside that sensor. They're reading the infrared radiation of the environment, and they're both weighted equally. Well, if one of those elements are burned out or not reading properly, it's picking up a difference. It's telling the camera there's a difference in IR radiation in that environment, causing it to take a photo. Mm-hmm. So that's the root of why that's occurring. But the easiest way to troubleshoot that and kind of confirm that there's not a branch or a piece of grass or something blowing around is to take that camera, set it up, format your SD card so there's no data on your SD card, there's no pictures, and set it against the wall. Mm-hmm. Set it or put it face down on a counter.
Yep.
To where
Nothing
you should only have a couple pictures of you setting the camera down and then picking it up.
Yep.
And if that thing's taking a bunch of pictures for no reason, we call it a runaway PIR is what we call that. Runaway.
The old runaway.
The old runaway.
Now let's talk about, my camera isn't taking any pictures. They think they walk up to it or something like that. Let's, number one, just tackle that, because I know there's a couple things that are important that need to be discussed.
Yeah. The easiest way to troubleshoot that yourself, if you think the camera is missing photos, one is make sure you understand the way you have it programmed. Mm-hmm. So your trigger delay, operating hours, all that stuff. But set that camera up and just do a damn walk test. Mm-hmm. Set the camera up in an area with the trigger delay in mind, operating hours, all of the mode you have it programmed with it. If it's in time lapse, obviously this isn't going to work. You need to have it in picture mode or video. But just walk left and right in front of that camera at 10-foot intervals out to the end of the detection, and then go back and look at the pictures.
Yep.
If you should have a picture of you walking into that detection area or detection zone from the left and the right. Now you can also do that walking straight onto the camera, and 99% of the time, because of the way those PIR sensors are built with the Fresnel lens, the camera is going to struggle picking you up head on until you're very, very close to those elements can pick up, the difference in IR radiation. But that's the easiest way to know if the camera's picking you up, you're not missing any photos, then it's the way you have the camera set up. Maybe it's angled toward the ground, maybe it's angled up in the air. Mm-hmm. One of the things we don't get a lot, but we'll get guys call and say, I had this camera set up over a feeder. I was in my tree stand watching a deer in front of the camera, and it only took 2 pictures, but the deer was there for, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's missing photos. And then you start troubleshooting this issue over the phone, and you find out the guy had it on a 5-minute trigger delay.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's all it's going to do. If you have a 5-minute trigger delay, it's only going to take pictures every 5 minutes if there's something in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that kind of stuff, I think some people get worked up or jump to conclusions because they've had such bad experiences with cameras failing that they think, oh, there's a deer in front of that camera. I should have got a picture. I didn't. The camera's junk.
Most people think the first thought is something's wrong with the camera.
Yeah.
Like that is what people have been conditioned to think. If there's any sort of hiccup or anything, it's the camera's fault, and it's never anything environmental or anything like that.
Right.
So that can kind of sometimes be frustrating. That's just the way people have been conditioned.
Right.
But if you know these things and have a higher understanding of cameras in general, you can look at it from a little better perspective.
Right.
Which is key a lot of times.
Right. And and another thing, if you think the camera's missing photos, some of that may relate to PIR issues too.
I was thinking that as well. We cruised through a bunch of stuff. Is there other topics, any troubleshooting things that you can think of that we haven't covered?
Not that. I mean, those are pretty much the basic things that you could probably troubleshoot from home. I mean, there's nothing really off the top of my head. You know, if you think your pictures are out of focus or something like that, that's something. I mean, most of the lenses in these cameras they're fixed. You know, fixed focus, and the lens that we use actually gets threaded into a socket. So they have to be installed correctly for that focal length and everything to be on point. So if they're not installed correctly, it is. I mean, we have had, I don't know, a handful of cameras. I don't know exactly how many. Well, they're just out of focus. Mm-hmm. But you know, there's nothing you can really. That goes back to the manufacturer. There's nothing you can really do as a consumer to troubleshoot any of that.
One last one, if you forget your password, give us a jingle.
Yes.
And we're gonna check to see if you bought the camera too. If
that's first thing we do.
That's part of kind of what we do with theft policy.
That's why that the override or the default or the bypass, whatever you want to call it, to unlock it isn't published in any of our user guides or online.
And it's actually a hidden deep secret in Exodus. I just learned it the other day.
Yeah. So I on every model it's a little bit different.
Yep.
From model to model.
So if you stole a Trek in Illinois, along the Illinois River, don't you dare call in. I was messing, but no, I think those are all really good things, and I think if you run into an issue, you might have a better idea on how to handle it, whether it's something you can troubleshoot or you need to call the manufacturer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully we hope that you kicked off 2019 with a great day, and we're looking forward to 2019, and hopefully you are too. And it's always the new year, new me kind of deal, but it's the same thing here. Yep. It's day after day, getting after it, and I have a feeling if you're listening to this, you're probably right. Cut from the same cloth in that regard.
Yes, sir.
Until next time, take it easy.